Okay, so let's start this session. Welcome, everyone. My name is Pascal van Kerven. Most of you will already know me. I'm the coordinator of the course Writing a PhD Research Proposal. And today we will have some special guests, the participants in the PhD writing course, as we call it in the corridors of last spring. They are currently in the process of developing their research proposals. They just drafted their third draft of their proposals, which is the preliminary version of their research proposal, which they will present today. There will be two speakers, the ones here in front that are physically present today, and there will be 4 speakers online. How it goes is as follows. The presentations will take 10 minutes. And then there will be 5 minutes for questions. Hopefully some questions will come from the audience here. There may also be questions from the people who follow the live stream online on YouTube. We will check that every now and then. Not sure whether there's any people there at the moment. This morning we had this big departmental meeting somewhere else, not here at the university premises, but in some castle outside of the city. Hopefully, some people will still get here today. I see at least Lisbeth here right now, and there's also someone else was attending this session. So hopefully, some more people will come in later. It's all possible. It's supposed to be a very relaxed setting, although I can imagine that the presenters today are not so much relaxed. I'm quite relaxed, actually. I'm really looking forward to your stories. Without further ado, I would think we should move to the first speaker. First of all, we do the 2 face-to-face speakers, and the first one is Katrien Butgen, and her talk will be about student agency in the age of AI. That's at least the main title, and the rest will come.
Thank you, Pascal.
The floor is yours.
Thanks. Okay, so yeah, hi everyone. My name is Katrien Butgen. I'm a teacher, and I'm not necessarily connected to the health part of it, but I feel that I'm settled in education. So that's where my research is situated. And my research is about student agency in the age of AI. So it's about exploring how they work with the concept of effort, ownership, authorship, who's writing, if you have a co-writer. So if writing is thinking, yeah, because that's where we are in each kind of our assessments, who's doing the thinking now? Of course, that's what we're interested in. And so of course, we know that the writing process itself is changing. That's nothing new. And writing is what makes our thinking visible. You talk about things, you read things, but when you write down, you have to go to the deeper phase of it. And so now the thinking is actually being shared with machines, with an artificial intelligence, with an algorithm that we don't fully understand. And my question is about, well, really about authorship. And why am I doing this research right now? It's because of this narrative that is connected to it for us as teachers. Oh, students are lazy. They're going to use ChatGPT anyway. They just want to be done with it. They just want to get it over with. True, to some extent. But from preliminary studies and pilots that I and other researchers, of course, have done, students are also navigating, which is a very AI word, of course. But students are also searching for the way their approach, because they want to learn. They want to earn this certificates, they want to master the skill of writing, and they want to get down to deep thinking. But of course, it's also different when you have assistants. Then it's about writing, not about the product, but about this cognitive process behind it, and about a framework. So is it about detection policies? Is it about plagiarism? I actually feel that there is still a need for policies and for clarity and ownership, and also this idea of being proud of what you have written, achieved, even if it might be co-writing. Yeah. So my theoretical framework, which is something I'm very happy to share, it took me quite a while to find it. And it's actually based on very straightforward, the process of writing theory from Flower and Hayes. And it's built on the idea that writing is a planning phase and a translating phase, which doesn't have to do with language translation, but it's more this conceptual translating back and forth. You have something in your mind, you write it down, you rewrite it, you'd be like, okay, extra info. So this is you have your drafting, which is planning, then the translating, which is the writing back and forth, and then the revising phase, which is the fine-tuning afterwards. So that's my basic framework. And for my different studies, I will go over it with different lenses. So for one study, I'll be looking at it with a lens of the cognitive load. Yeah, so does it make it easier, and therefore you don't get to the deep learning, but you stay on a more shallow level. For another study, I'll be looking more at this idea of rhetorical load sharing and agency. And for another one, it's more on authorship and identity, this idea of being proud. Yes, so working with one framework, and then for different studies, different lenses on top of that framework. That really helped me to clarify that. My research question is, how does the use of generative AI tools during academic writing influence students' perceptions of authorship, effort, agency across the writing process? And how are these perceptions related to the quality of their written work? Yeah, so it also has a lot to do with own awareness, ratings, yeah. And that research question has different layers to it. The first sub-question is, how do students use their AI during the different phases of writing? And this also is connected to their self-reporting. So they will self-report on this. How do they experience cognitive and emotional effort? What's their range there, and how does this affect their quality? Next one would be, how will this be measured? How can we make meaning of this if there is no scale for this, if there is some sort of measurement form? That's what I wanna measure and model, hopefully. And yeah, how do they perceive it? So these are the 4 sub-elements. And in my research project, this is built up as such. In the first phase, it's about empirical exploration. The first study is on AI use across the writing phases. The second on cognitive and emotional effort and the writing quality. In the next phase, the second phase, is the third study where I hope to develop some sort of construct, a measurement tool for authorship and agency. And in the last one, I hope to do predictive modeling on a large scale to find validation for my model and, well, to hopefully make sense out of what I have measured. If we look at the studies a bit in more depth, then of course each study has its own research question. And basically I keep on working with the same theoretical framework. I do data collection, I work with reflective diaries, I talk to people, and I'll have a lot of qualitative data. And of course, I'll analyze it, and then I'll go back and make sense of that data analysis within my theoretical framework of the writing model. For the second study, in similar vein, I'm going to look at the cognitive and emotional effort related to the quality of the product. And there I have my basis theoretical framework plus the cognitive load theory plus rhetorical load sharing. The data collection will be with eye tracking, where I hope to get, well, we can do it both via the laptop, where we can do a lot of measurements in class. And then there's also eye tracking, where we go more in depth with sessions of 15 students, which will be a massive individual project. And then perhaps also align it with some think alouds, but I'm not completely there yet. But the eye tracking is definitely happening. So, and then of course, data analysis, which is quite tricky apparently with eye tracking. So I'm studying that right now. How can we make sense of it? What of all of those data we are actually looking for? So I'm familiarizing myself with that tool and then looking back at it again on the theoretical framework. For my construct development, my third study, I'm going to collect data in interviews, but also focus groups, and talk to people and set this up. And then hopefully I'll be able to build my scale. Oh yeah, and then in a second phase, that's what I want to say. I basically have a preliminary phase where I'm going to talk to people to get a preliminary set of data. And then in the second round, I'm going to have a validation phase where I hope to validate that on a larger scale. But before I'm going to send that out, I will do a little pilot session. And then for the fourth study, the predictive modeling, it'll be along the key variables of AI tool frequency, but also phase involvement, cognitive effort, and confidence ownership. And then hopefully I'm going to do some structural equation modeling and regression. So that will be my hardest quantitative study to measure. And then hopefully, eventually, my outcome will be a tested model of authorship and agency in AI-assisted academic writing. Yes. Why it matters? Well, there is educational relevance to it, of course, societal relevance to create this new narrative, scientific relevance to find new concepts and methodologies, and to generate actionable insights. So this is also best practice sharing. What are you doing? Creating dialogue within the community. And all in all, I hope that from reading and proposal writing, eventually I'm going to get to a dissertation within 4 years, supported by my lovely team, which is me, my supervisor, my playmakers, and my promoter, Saskia Brandgruwel, who incidentally, but also luckily for me, did kind of the same research when the internet first came out. So I think I'm very lucky to have her, because I think the same what we're going through right now with AI, she went through it when the internet first happened. So she's been the wiser of it now, 25 years later. And I hope to do something similar with this AI writing. That's it. I'm ready for questions.
Thank you. Should use this one not so much for you in this room, but for people online, so that they can hear me actually. So thanks a lot, Katrien. There's some time for questions. Anyone from the audience? Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Excellent presentation, great topic, very relevant to today's times. I have a question, and with that, perhaps a follow-up question. When you talk about writing, is there a language that you were keeping in mind? Is this Dutch or English? And have you considered whether EDI would play a role here? Are your students, are they diverse? And would that change how AI would be used by them? Thank you.
Yes. Oh, yeah. They are very good questions. My students indeed are from an international background. I think we have 75% Dutch students and then 25% international students from all over. And we do indeed teach in English, which is also, not the first language that they're speaking. So the study will also be in English, which is also their academic writing setting. And the cultural diversity, I did not take into account, and I probably also will not. Maybe as one of the sub-variables, the background variables when I'm going to do the large-scale survey. But for all other study designs in the classroom, it's really task-oriented and focused on that, with all students being equal in that sense. Yeah, and then, of course, what I've seen already in pilots, which is very interesting, is that some students, based on gender, based on AI literacy, based on openness to using it, based on ethical considerations, are using it more or less. But there is definitely more to the narrative and to this idea of guided writing than students just wanting to get it over with. Yes. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. Any other questions? There's still a bit of time. Yeah. Tonya.
Well, thank you. I agree. It's an extremely relevant topic. So I love that you're doing this. I have a couple questions about the writing. So you're mentioning academic writing, and I'm just wondering kind of what type of academic writing you're looking at, more like scientific research writing or more narrative. I wasn't sure if there was a topic of the writing.
Yeah, good question. Of course. So I have different assignments that I can cling onto and just use for my study. Same goes for the students in the courses. So I have one course, for example, so I do European studies, and I teach the economic courses. And students, for example, write opinionated articles about what they think of a specific economic concept. And with that opinion, of course, it's important that they, do the factual research, but also get their opinion onto paper. So that's one of the assignments. Then there is one assignment where they have to write an action plan. There is one where they'll have to make a situation where they have a defense proposal. So there's all kinds of different writing assignments, and that differs.
Great. I just have one more question. So you mentioned that they're self-assessing the quality of their writing. And now, are you also doing an assessment of the writing? So, and how do you assess their writing? What measurement are you using?
I have a couple of quality matrices. I haven't really pinpointed the one down yet I want to use, but there's a couple ones that I have on my short list. And for the students, of course, there's also the assessment form that I have previously already built. And then I might refocus the assessment forms that I use in the course, that my colleagues use, and that the students use also for self-assessment, peer assessment, based on the criteria that I want to highlight from the framework that I'll use. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Regarding the time, we need to move on to the next speaker. Thank you very much, Katrien.
Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so, and the next speaker is the second speaker here actually physically present. Sorry, yeah, okay. And that's Michael Cazzara. Oh yeah, you're just putting the PowerPoint forward. Thank you very much. And this talk is about simulation reimagined. Let's... Yeah, okay. And he's going to explain it right now. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Michael.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here at Maastricht again. Don't mind my accent. I'm from New York, and I'm a practicing emergency physician with who's transitioned into academic clinical educator role, and now I'm hopefully going to be on the verge of going into education research. So this is my thesis proposal, Beyond Mastery Learning, reimagining simulation as preparation for future learning to support adaptive expertise. Just wanted to acknowledge that I don't have any conflicts of interest to report. So in today's presentation, I want to take a couple of minutes just to sort of lay the landscape. There's a crucial emerging imperative for adaptive expertise among healthcare professionals. And part of that, I'd love to talk about preparation for future learning. It's one of the components that helps build adaptive expertise. And yet simulation is something that I'm going to claim is an instructional modality that has untapped potential for supporting preparation for future learning. And so at the end of the presentation, I hope to sort of make a claim and a case for my proposed research thesis of 4 studies. So let's take a look at this. Today's physicians need adaptive expertise. And adaptive expertise is part of a more holistic, multidimensional construct of professional expertise that was first proposed by Hatano and Inagaki in 1986. And it extends the previous work of Dreyfus and Dreyfus in 1980. So Dreyfus and Dreyfus came up with a 5-step model for motor skill development that went from novice to expert. And experts in their model were people who were capable of applying routine solutions to tasks. And they were able to apply those solutions with efficiency, with automaticity, with speed. And in doing so, they had reduced cognitive load. Hatano and Inagaki had called this routine expertise. But adaptive expertise is something entirely different. they felt that there is, in some experts, a capacity to innovate and create new solutions, especially when the routine solutions didn't work. These would be situations in which they were recognized as entirely foreign or novel contexts where they're totally unfamiliar to the operators, and the physicians or the other practitioners who were doing the task just wouldn't be able to apply the solutions, or they were uncertain about which solutions to apply. And so these are the adaptive experts. The reality is that adaptive expertise is something that's really hard to acquire. This curve here looks nice and smooth, looks linear, it looks like a learning curve that you would probably see for any sort of domain, but this is not the learning curve for adaptive expertise. It actually looks more like this. Acquisition of adaptive expertise is slow, it's effortful. It's nonlinear, as this representation would suggest. And therefore, to understand how to build adaptive expertise, we have to take a look at it a little bit more closely. What gets you to routine expertise doesn't get you to adaptive expertise, and then it takes something more and something very different. So let's work backwards. If our overarching goal is to move towards learners who have adaptive expertise, we have to consider how we get them there. And so the literature would suggest that there's two prerequisites. One of them is the attainment of routine expertise. But the other one is preparation for future learning. So we have to talk about preparation for future learning. I'm going to call it PFL. And PFL is one's capacity to learn new information by using resources effectively to invent new strategies for problem solving when you're in practice. And there's a lot of different key strategies that contribute to preparation for future learning. And here's 5 of them that the literature describes. Medical education that builds PFL capacity invests in one's development as a master learner alongside their development as a master clinician. And so these master learners, to be capable of self-regulated, self-directed metacognition and learning, they need to have experiences that are built with these 5 characteristics. So I call these characteristics sensitizing instructional strategies that support PFL. And so metacognition is one of them. We need educational instructional experiences that provide the opportunity for self-directed or for guided metacognition. And that's metacognition in action, on action, for future action. Another thing that education must do is it must emphasize deep conceptual understanding, like meaningful learning, not just rote memorization. Third thing is that it must provide meaningful variation. You have to see multiple different phenotypes of one condition, and you have to see other conditions that look like mimics to one another, like one similar sort of thing. It has to induce productive struggle, even at the expense of productive failure. And a lot of times what we see in health professions education is productive success. Finally, it has to allow for guided discovery. And so all these things are very, very important for supporting education that promotes competency building towards preparation for future learning, which is necessary to build adaptive expertise. And so simulation is an educational modality that's ubiquitous across the medical education continuum, from undergraduate to graduate medical education and beyond. Unfortunately, in medical education, the routine integration of preparation for future learning just across all of competency-based medical education continues to lag, and in simulation, it's no different. So simulation, despite being ubiquitous, has really adopted a simulation-based mastery learning orientation. What this means is that it emphasizes routinization of competency. Now, to its credit, this promotes enduring replicative and applicative knowledge transfer, meaning you could take knowledge from that you've learned in a lab, let's say, and you could apply it to clinical practice, let's say, or at least apply it to the lab again. You can even probably make some small adjustments, but to adaptively transfer to a totally foreign circumstance, this just doesn't do. At least the literature doesn't support that. It does not do that because it doesn't incorporate the needed PFL characteristics. It doesn't support the building of or the promotion of preparation for future learning, which is needed for adaptive expertise. Now, it doesn't mean that all is dismal. In the last 20 years, there's been some emerging developments. Simulation has been used both as a means to measure adaptive transfer, and those are called double transfer designs, and those have been done in simulation pretty effectively. And they also incorporate elements of preparation for future learning. And one of the best examples is right here in Maastricht and in the Netherlands. Rendon and Deacon described using ecological dynamics and constraint-led approaches in their simulation designs to show adaptive knowledge transfer. What's missing, though, from these designs, whether it's the double transfer design or the incorporation of ecological dynamics, as a theoretical basis is that it doesn't explicitly provide preparation for future learning. It doesn't do the metacognitive piece that's so essential for adaptive expertise development. So my research question is, how could we design simulations with PFL characteristics that support physicians in training's capacity for self-regulated, self-directed metacognition and learning that's needed for future adaptive expertise? And why, how, for whom, and under what circumstances would they work? And so here's the nature of my research thesis. There's 4 studies. Hopefully, if all goes well, I can wrap that around an introduction and a discussion and accomplish that in a meaningful period of time. We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's focus on study 1 first, though. Study 1 intends to be a realist review. The research question that's guiding the realist review is what simulation designs support PFL and its key characteristics, and how and why do they work? So under a realist review, we're going to follow a realist paradigm. I'm really going to pay attention to a CMO heuristic, that's context, mechanisms, and outcomes. I'm going to follow Paulson's 5-step process to implement the study, develop a search strategy, build it, formulate it, implement it, and find reports in the literature. I'm looking for reports of simulations that have designs that would implicitly incorporate PFL characteristics or would otherwise, well, I haven't found many in my review that at all that support PFL directly. So I'm looking for the implicit ones and to see how and why they work. I'm going to use the Remises 2 guidelines as a way of ensuring rigor. So here's a visual of study 1. I'm going to analyze prior designs that are reported in the literature. I'm going to look specifically at design principles, design elements, outcomes. That's the CMO heuristic. In between design elements and outcomes, there are mediating processes. We build curricula and events that make processes happen that deliver the reported or the observed outcomes that are seen. Why everything works is a conjecture. I'm going to look in the reports to see if the authors propose conjectures. If they don't propose any, the authorship team is going to propose them. And we're going to use these designs in study 1 for the rest of the other studies. Let's look at study 2. Study 2 is basically going to take everything from study 1, and we're going to share it. We're going to share it with medical education and simulation experts and get their perspectives on the feasibility, on the barriers, and the facilitators to using these to build simulations as preparation for future learning. So study 2 is guided by this research question: what are medical education and simulation experts' perspectives as designing simulations with PFL characteristics for physicians in training in GME? So it is a qualitative exploration. It's going to follow a constructivist interpretist paradigm. We're going to analyze the methods with constructivist grounded theory approaches. It's going to follow a 7-step process that's described by Ravitch and Cole and informed by Ramini and Mann. And we're going to do purposive sampling to recruit medical experts, medical education and simulation experts, and conduct semi-structured interviews. We're going to follow SRQR as our rigor, as our method of ensuring rigor. When we move to study 3, we're going to take basically all of those elements, put them off to the side, and do something a little bit different. We're going to go to certified practicing physicians, and we're going to ask them about their lived experiences with productive struggle. The question you might ask is, why would we do this? It's because we need stories. We need the stories to build the scenarios for the simulations that we can bring to our learners, so that way they can experience productive struggle. So we're going to really zone in on productive struggle right now. So we're going to go to certified practicing physicians. We're going to ask them questions, hopefully to answer this question, which is what are certified practicing physicians' perspectives on and what's their lived experience with productive struggle. So productive struggle is being situated in an environment where you don't know what the answer is and you're not capable by yourself of creating the answer. And so you need a more knowledgeable other there. It's sort of like being in Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. We're going to use a phenomenological approach. Again, we're going to use constructivist interpretist paradigms, use constructivist grounded theory to analyze our results, a 7-step process by Ramini and Mann or Ravitch and Cole, and then purposive sampling of certified practicing physicians at my home institution, and semi-structured interviews. After all of this, we're going to get to study 4. Well, I can't say after all of this because it's actually going to hopefully happen somewhere after study 1 as results are being derived from studies 2 and 3. So there's going to be more of a longitudinal bent to study 4. But study 4, I think, is the fun, exciting part. This is the attempt to design, pilot, implement, and then evaluate the new design, simulation reimagined, as preparation for future learning. So the research question here is, how and why does technology enhanced mannequin simulation with characteristics of productive struggle support physician in training's PFL? So this is going to be loosely at this point based on a design-based research approach. I say loosely because the timing is going to make this a little bit difficult unless I can get actionable data early. So we're going to follow a realist paradigm. We're going to create simulations and incorporate emergency medicine residents at my home institution into pilot implementations. Hopefully we'll do at least 2 of these implementations over a 1 to 2 year period. That's why I'm sort of a little bit suspect. I want to go longitudinally, though. I'm looking at different designs, perhaps with the same population, as opposed to having different cohorts see the same design. I want to go for the long haul and to understand, what does the curriculum do and how does it work and why does it do what it does? I'm going to use activity theory to inform a mixed method process of evaluation. And that's still in process, but I could probably explain some questions. I don't have a graphic for this study because it would be a little complicated given the time. I just want to say that this is the study overall. I expect this will probably take about 5 years, but I'd like to make some acknowledgments. Just Professor Kester, who's here in the audience, she's been invaluable. Her knowledge transfer and all things education research are amazing. Also, Dr. Peter Rendon, he's excellent as a motor scientist, and he's taught me so much about ecological dynamics and constraint-led approaches. And their patience, both of them with me and my language, is fascinating. I have some people at home that I'd just like to acknowledge, but I won't take up more time. I'll take some questions if that's okay.
Thank you, Michael, for your excellent talk. There's not much time for questions, but at least one can be taken, I think. Anyone? Yes? Yeah. Or otherwise I would have a question.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Very interesting. Lots of concepts in there, which you rolled out so beautifully and explained so well. I did have a question about the mixed methods.
Sure.
And is there a reason that why you would choose that or anything else? Were you hoping to achieve something specific in that?
As in the last study, specifically? Yeah. First of all, activity theory was something that fascinated me. I've seen it used in an article by Swanwick for direct observations in the clinical environment. And I figured that I'm going to be doing the direct observations in the simulated environment. So it just fascinated me. When I look at activity theory, it's really grounded by Engstrom. Probably in the early 2000s, he spoke about expansive learning theory, and activity theory looks at like an educational event, or the learning that's associated with an educational event and all the different pieces. So the object of the event, the subject of the event, the environment, the tools, the artifacts, and everything else you can think of. There's a nice little pyramidal sort of graphic that I left out, but it just captures all the facets. So I think that there's an opportunity there to get to think of using activity theory to inform the mixed methods approach. I'm going to get just lots of rich data. There's a couple of approaches that I keep waffling with. So the mixed methods, I would love to interview the participants, the students. I want to interview the faculty, the staff who run the simulations. Then I want to look at the outputs, if there's artifacts, if there's other sort of tools that they use, how do they use them and why do they work? I want to look at also the characteristics of the design. And then finally, I would even like to, if it's possible, I don't think it's likely, Q methodology. I'd love to see if I can do sort of like an inverse factor analysis to understand how the participants, whether it's the faculty or the learners, how they sort of decide what worked for them and why, or what was not so working so well and why. So I think there's richness in the mixed methods approach that I'd love to take into the study if I could.
Thank you for that answer. All the best.
I hope so.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Given the time, I think we should move on. Thank you. So the next speaker will be online, if I'm correct. And that is Rebecca Müller. And her talk will be about role clarity, hierarchy, and collaboration, exploring interprofessional dynamics in primary care in a primary care team. Rebecca, the digital floor is yours. Hopefully she's there.
I am here. Thank you so much. Are my slides there and everything? Yes, you can see them? Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon to all of you in person, and good morning to those of us who have it a little bit earlier. I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to hear and then see the presentations of all my colleagues in this cohort as well. It's been a good day so far. I would like to note that Dario and Jasha have been superbly helpful throughout the last months, making themselves very available, going through and editing work with me on a detailed level. I'm very, very grateful for them. And today I'd like to talk about hierarchy, role clarity, and shared decision-making in the primary care setting. I want to start by first acknowledging that I do actually live and work on stolen land in Canada. This is in an effort of reconciliation to acknowledge this every time I am presenting. So Winnipeg is a bit in the center of Canada. You can see it highlighted in blue in the somewhat blurry map that you have. And it's also known as a Treaty 1 territory. I also want to note that I do have an effort here to apply a social justice lens to the work that I do. I recognize, though, that language is always changing, and I'm very much open to learning in this sector and open to the feedback. So if you have any in this reflection, please let me know. I have no grants or funding support for this project to disclose. This is a picture of some colleagues that I work with, and just as a note, all pictures that I share today are shared with consent. A bit about me. I am a physician assistant. I am the University of Manitoba's program director for the Master of Physician Assistant Studies program. I am the co-founder and chair of the Canadian Federation of Physician Assistant Educators, and I sit on a subgroup committee for the provincial government on health workforce planning. But really, outside of work, these are the people who make my life enjoyable and why I do everything I do. The center picture is my husband and 2 children, and I love this picture of them because it demonstrates their personalities coming through and through in that photo. My mother and grandmother are here holding baby goats, and my grandmother 2 weeks ago celebrated 100. Okay, so back to the project here. I'd like to set the stage for the primary care landscape in Canada, which is reflective of similar areas across the globe. The truth is that there's just a shortage of family physicians. Health Canada estimates just under 14,000 family physicians is how many we are short today. This obviously presents access challenges, and much more so in rural and remote communities. A national survey called Our Care, published recently, found that 1 out of 5 Canadians do not have access to primary care. You can see through this map that there is some variation across the provinces, but overall there's an access gap. In comparison to, in the global context, you can see that this is far below where we should be. Netherlands at the top here has more than half of the population with access to same-day or next-day primary care. And in Canada, we do not have that. This is a pronounced issue for those of our population who are Indigenous or living on reserve. Historically, primary care is led by family physicians. But we really have to relook at this. Really, from both a Health Canada perspective and a World Health Organization perspective, the way forward and the path forward is really multidisciplinary care. But we have to have multidisciplinary care in a manner that actually has effective primary care. So optimal team-based care is true collaboration. It's more than just referring to somebody. It's more than working in parallel. And the context and environments of these situations do matter. Physician assistants, or PAs, are increasingly being employed in primary care settings to extend physician services. So just a note about what PAs are, who we are. We entered the civilian workforce in Canada in the early 2000s. We practice in every province in Canada, and we are in over 40 countries across the globe, including a handful of us in the Netherlands. We have a very broad scope of practice with a master's level of education that focuses on a general practice and then enables PAs to work in varied specialties. We have a scope that is flexible and adapts to meet the demands and needs of the setting we are in. This flexibility of our scope is a mirrored scope to our physician colleagues, but we do work only under direct or indirect supervision from a physician. And that scope then adapts to meet both the skills of the PA practicing as well as the needs of the community we're working in. A colleague of mine, Ann Ding, makes much better infographics than I could ever make. So I have borrowed this infographic from her. And the picture collage on the other side is various photos of my students. Actually, this cohort just graduated, and they are learning various procedures in that picture collage. And we have a saying in Canada that PAs can do that. And so our infographics reflect that. We are taking histories, doing physical exams, ordering diagnostic tests, interpreting those tests, performing procedures and interventions, developing a treatment plan, diagnosing and prescribing medications. And all of this combined shows in evidence that we decrease patient wait times. We provide quality patient care, and we are the only profession in Canada to have evidence that we decrease physician burnout. So for all these reasons, PAs are increasingly being employed in the primary care setting. But this does present an interesting dynamic from the interprofessional collaborative team-based model in primary care. The integration of PAs adds this complexity, specifically around hierarchy. And the duality of the PA role is inherently linked to the PAs. And by duality of role, I mean occasionally they are performing tasks traditionally done by physicians or substituting physician work, all the way to working along a continuum, all the way to complementary work or extending the team's capacity. And this function and duality of function is really shaped by the existing professional hierarchies and power relationships that are in place that have been inherent in the healthcare system for a long time. So this shift from physician authority to collaboration could potentially bring in some role ambiguity. And it's important to really understand how these unequal power relationships exist and how they impact our role clarity and shared decision making. In order to investigate this further, we need to understand the lay of the landscape this far. In 1988, Abbott, not in a medical setting, but outside of that, looked at professional jurisdictions. Abbott's work brings us to asking the questions about who claims ownership over diagnosing between the PA and the physician, who claims ownership over prescribing or making a treatment plan, and how are these tasks justified. In 1992, Witts assessed professional closure, looking at how dominance might be maintained within a workplace setting. So who is kept out versus allowed in, and under what types of supervision, and how are these boundaries monitored? And that brought us to 2005, when Nancarrow and Barthwick looked at professional boundaries in the medical workforce. How are PA roles adapting and shifting, and that the scope of practice can be blurred in various settings. So this brings us to questions asking about the PA role on a continuum of substituting, delegating, innovating, and even supplementing physician work, and what tensions can arise from that. So in short, this project aims to seek investigating how these hierarchical relationships between PAs and physicians influence the PA role clarity and shared decision-making in primary care teams in Manitoba. The aim is really to generate a practical framework that can highlight the ways in which hierarchy dynamics and professional boundaries are navigated in the primary care sector. I do want to say that in order to look at that, we really have to look at three various settings. So the first being the urban primary care setting. This is a picture from a clinic with a K. It starts with a K, and it is near downtown Winnipeg. So absolutely an urban type setting. This is a collage of Steinbach Family Medical Team. They are about 2 hours outside of the city, have a lot of farmland in that area, and that would be considered rural, but we cannot forget the importance of looking at remote sites. Canada as a whole is a very large country and has many areas that are quite remote to get to. Northern Manitoba is actually a constellation of islands. They're mostly reserves, so Indigenous peoples of Canada are who live there. There are no roads up there. You have to fly to get there. So in this picture, you can see there is a runway. You fly, and this island really just has the runway that you land on. And then you have to get to various islands. You might have to take a plane that lands on water, or in winter, we would take snowmobiles to get to the clinics. These clinics quite obviously have a very different setting and landscape for primary care. To look at the 4 studies that I would like to conduct in order to answer my aim, I'll take a critical theory paradigm, really noting and rooting and grounding this in the fact that reality is socially constructed and shaped by the power relations and historical structures in place. The first study, I would like to assess the lived experiences of PAs and physicians working in primary care across these 3 various settings in urban, rural, and remote Manitoba. And how do they perceive hierarchy in their workplace? How do they perceive PA role clarity along substitutive to complementary continuum? And how is shared decision-making experienced? This will be done using purposeful sampling, hopefully 20 to 30 semi-structured interviews, and the sample size will be guided by theoretical sufficiency here. I will use constant comparative analysis and category coding in order to assess these themes. Study 2 will repeat the same methods, likely the same group of people as well, but really diving deeper and looking at barriers and enablers. What things influence the hierarchy and role clarity and shared decision making? Study 3 will really bring us into a co-created framework. So we'll run some focus groups comprised of various PAs and MDs working together. At least 3 focus groups will be conducted, and we'll look at what strategies they co-create together to address hierarchy, role clarity, and shared decision-making. And study 4, I'd like to put that into action and bring this to a larger sample size across at least 3 different CPD simulation style type events across Canada. I would be presenting these workshops and running them likely at national conferences. So FMF, which is our Family Medicine Forum, ICAM, which is our National Medical Education Forum, and CAPA, which is the National PA Conference. At these 3, I should be able to gather quite a large sample size of PAs and MDs to further clarify these strategies. My hope is that these 4 studies collectively will bring together a practical framework of co-developed strategies that can be used to inform future guidelines or recommendations to have a clearly defined PA-physician relationship within interprofessional primary care teams. Here is a QR code to my references if you'd like to review them, and I'm not sure if there are time for questions or not.
Thank you, Rebecca. There is time for some questions, just very short, but if there are any right now, then, or any online, by the way, people online can also ask questions. If there's anything popping up, please let me know. Any questions for Rebecca? Anxiously waiting.
It's okay. There's no pressure to ask the question. Maybe that means
I was wondering, Rebecca. Oh, I'm standing in front of the camera, I think. I was thinking. I like that idea of these physician assistants. We also have them in the Netherlands. Yeah. And I was wondering, so of course, it's a problem that there is little access to healthcare in some areas of the country. Canada is, of course, a way different country from way different from the Netherlands. It's remote. Many areas are remote, etc., etc. And of course, there's a high pressure on healthcare because there's many people, although Canada is not so densely populated, of course. What I was wondering is to what extent is also so I see that physicians need help to cover all that healthcare. To what extent is also prevention part of the mix here, and is that something that is also that physician assistants could also have a role in?
Well, in the primary care setting, absolutely, right? So, and that will be, something when we ask questions in the interview about that scope of practice and role clarity and how are those decisions made? Is it that the PA is focusing mostly on preventative care? Is it that they're focusing mostly on chronic care? How are they deciding and navigating those relationships with the hierarchy in place? So absolutely, PAs are practicing preventative medicine in the primary care setting. Although anecdotally, I can say that the primary care setting is actually filled with quite heavy patient loads. They're complex, they're comorbid. So having PAs solely work on preventative medicine would miss a large gap of people.
Yeah. And I understand that in the short run, of course, that's not really a solution, but in the long run, perhaps it is. Not sure. Thank you very much.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. We now, wait a second. Oh, short question, perhaps? Yeah, before we go into the break?
Maybe a short question. Thank you for your presentation. Very clear and nice. I had a question about the theoretical framework. I noticed that the references you used were rather old. Does that mean that those theories, and there's nothing wrong with that per se, but does it mean that those theories aren't evolving anymore? Or is it just that you wanted to go back to the source when the theory started?
I want to see how those theories have developed over time. And the truth is, though, that those theories, although they might be old, they are the backbone of what's still being used. And it's a relatively unexplored area in medicine, and certainly not explored between PAs and MDs. So those are the theorists that are still referenced when looking at hierarchy dynamics in medicine between, for example, physicians and nursing. Although it's incredibly unexplored area of primary care. So I think it's important to understand where we started with this and see how it's come along. So 2005 is the most recent theory that's been implemented. As far as I know, I still have a lot of reading to do. I could have missed it.
No. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so welcome back after the break. So we catch up regarding time. The next name on my list, I really need to read out from my paper here. That's Tien Ngoc Tan from Vietnam. And his talk is about transforming ambulatory care training in Vietnam, developing a learner-centered outpatient rotation model for resident doctors. Hopefully, Tien, you are online.
Yes,
you
I'm
are
online, Pascal.
Great,
Thank
and
you.
the floor is now yours. Go ahead.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone, and good evening from Vietnam. It's now here 8 p.m. and I'm very glad to be here to present my research project to all of you. And I remember 6 months ago, I also sat in that conference room and heard about all the presentations from the previous candidates. So today I have a chance, and I'm very glad, and I appreciate the program to let me this chance. So my project. My research project named Transforming Ambulatory Care Training in Vietnam, Developing a Learner-Centered Outpatient Rotation Model for Resident Doctors. So a little bit about me. So I'm now working in internal medicine residency program in College of Health Science University in Hanoi, Vietnam. I am the clinical faculty and also the program director of my program. And my presentation, there is no conflict of interest to declare. So as you know, so ambulatory care is the medical care provided for patients who do not need to be admitted to the hospital for inpatient care. In the other words, ambulatory care includes all medical services provided in outpatient setting. So what are the problems? So Vietnam ambulatory care system is insufficient in both quality and quantity. Many previous studies already show some of these problems. Some causes, such as resources limitations, high patient demand, evolving disease burden. From the government policy, we have chronic underfunding, shortage of healthcare professionals, aging infrastructure. And especially in Vietnam, we have the very specific context related to the socio-economic conditions. For example, right now in Vietnam, we are a developing country with the high speed of urbanization. And we have the changing lifestyle that happen, very fast. And of course, in Vietnam, we are an Asian country, and the involvement of family and also the community norms affect heavily into the decision of the patient coming to the hospital or coming to the clinic for the ambulatory care. And in parallel, Vietnam ambulatory care training have some critical things. The first one, most of the residency program almost focus on inpatient training. And all of them, they emphasize outpatient skills. And outpatient training is not in primary curriculum. And then the resident and student, they don't have any chance to have an official rotation in outpatient setting. And they lack of the autonomy and the chance for develop their skill in outpatient setting. So my project intends to address the problem of lacking a standard ambulatory care training with related factors. So what are known? So many previous studies in many developed countries, mostly in the global north, suggested that insufficient ambulatory care training can result in inadequate preparation and accordingly low quality of outpatient care. Something that all the studies show us that limited clinical experience is one of the most popular causes for the low quality of outpatient care, such as interviewing skill, physical examination skill, and managing psychosocial condition. Another soft skill like interprofessional communication and time management also lacking if we don't provide the sufficient ambulatory care training for the learners. And through decades, most of the global north residency programs are being built based on two main complementary education concepts. They are learner-centered education and competency-based medical education. But that's just for the developed country and from the global north, not in Vietnam. So in Vietnam right now, we are in the initial step to approach the CBME. But mostly all the residency program, we are not focusing and we don't have any experience to implement the learner-centered education, especially for ambulatory care training. And even though many innovations have been made, barriers which hinder effective implementation of ambulatory care training have also been recognized, even in the developed country. Some barriers such as maintenance costs, inadequate teaching space, lack of institutional support, conflict between medical education and healthcare facilities. But there are some facilitators that already been recognized, such as a broad range of disease and illnesses, receptive preceptors, and interdisciplinary team-based learning. So, but they are the barrier and facilitator are researched and figured out by many researchers, but mostly from the global north, from developed country, not in developing country like Vietnam. So what are the gaps? So here in Vietnam, we lack of a structured, evidence-based approach to ambulatory care training in low to middle income countries as Vietnam. And the second is, until now, there are very less, as I can say, there is no studies investigate on the effect of cultural and contextual challenges in RMIC. And even in developed country, even many studies have been done so far. There are some domains that need further investigation. For example, long-term changes in behavior of learners, impact of optimal outpatient scheduling model on trainees and patients, effectiveness of direct observation in outpatient setting. And we hope that from the research that I intend to do, and from the understanding of the themes which may significantly related to the outpatient rotation implementation, a training model will be developed that foster the active learning of residents and effectively evaluate core competency. So from those gaps, my main research question is, how can a context-specific ambulatory care training model effectively support resident doctors and clinical faculty in developing professional skills for outpatient settings in Vietnam? To answer this question, I have 4 sub-questions. The first one, which context-specific competencies are required for ambulatory care in Vietnam according to the perceptions of residents and ambulatory care doctors? The second question is, what are the barriers and opportunities for implementing ambulatory care training based on perception of residents and faculty? The third one is, how can an ambulatory care training model be designed and implemented to address Vietnam's specific healthcare needs? And the fourth one, how does the developed ambulatory care training model support resident and supervisors' development? And then I go to the research approach. that I schedule for study based on 4 research questions. So study 1, we try to identify the required skill and knowledge for outpatient care related to context challenges. The method I intend to use is qualitative analysis. We use two methods. The first one is semi-structured interview, and the second one is focus group. And the participant participant in this study, we include both the residents who have little experience at the passive learning in outpatient setting, also the ambulatory care doctor who experience a lot the outpatient setting. So with those two views, we can figure out, okay, what are the required competency to be effectively working in the outpatient setting. For the study 2, we try to identify possible barrier and facilitator of ambulatory care training in Vietnam. And we intend to use the mixed method, qualitative and quantitative survey for the quantitative with questionnaire with Likert scale. And for the qualitative, we use semi-structured interview. And the participant, of course, the residents and the faculty. From those two studies result, we come to the study 3 with the design-based research. We try to develop a structured outpatient training model and investigate the feasibility and acceptability of this new model in, we pilot this model in a small group of faculty and residents in my college. And then we will figure out the feasibility and acceptability of that model. And from the result of study 3, we want to scale up for the study 4. We try to evaluate the efficiency of training model in investigated domains. For example, for the method, we use the quantitative analysis with pre and post-intervention assessment. And we hope that with these 2 studies, before study and after study 4, we can figure out first the appropriate model that we can apply to Vietnamese context and also the other LMIC context. And the second one, we try to figure out some domains that have not been clear enough even in other countries. For example, long-term changes in behavior of learners, impact of optimal outpatient scheduling, and effectiveness of direct observation in outpatient setting. So that is all. It is a very brief summary of my research project proposal, and my research team, including me, Professor Eleanor Kohler, and Dr. Emmeline Brower. So that is a very brief summary about my project. So I would love to hear any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tien. Excellent timing. So there's time for some questions. Anyone? Perhaps to warm up a little bit. I was wondering, because you were talking about these lower and middle income countries, and it's sometimes, and you know better than I do, I think, we may think about these countries as being more or less the same, but that's of course not the case, right? So to what extent is your research, or would it be transferable to other lower and middle income countries in Southeast Asia, perhaps, or outside of that area?
Yeah, so that's my aspiration. Firstly, I just only focusing on the Vietnamese context, but then from my supervisor advice, so we need to contribute to the education profession, healthcare profession education. So then I try to do some more research. Then we can, after we can design the model that fits to the Vietnam. So what if that model can be like a role model for the other country who have the same condition as Vietnam? So that's why we aim to scale up this model to the other LMIC, country.
Yeah. Would there be any concrete collaborations possible already? Do you already have contact with, for instance, institutions in, say, Thailand or Laos or?
Yeah, yes, of course. Vinh University is international university, and we have very good collaboration with some other country institute healthcare professional education in China, in Laos, and also in Cambodia,
okay.
Indochina. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, there's a question online, it seems. That's an interesting occasion to two even. Yeah, you can say
yes.
it.
It says, in the first study you mentioned a qualitative method. Would you be conducting a Delphi or just creating one through a more deconstructed approach?
Yes, thank you. It's a very great questions. So even until now, it is the pre-version of my final proposal. My supervisor team also with me to figure out the Delphi study, of course, qualitative Delphi study is good enough, or we just do the qualitative in the, thematic analysis. But yes, that's a very good question. And I'm now on searching what is the better. So the Delphi study can give me a hierarchy of what is the order of the competency or skill. The order that what is the most likely, what is the most important, and then the less important, and then the less important. But it is very good. But we start in vague list. We don't know what is specific and what is the list of the competency that we try to focus on. So the Delphi study can be very good to do like the hierarchy, but we still in consideration that we do the qualitative to list out, the possible competency first. So thank you for your question. It is a good recommendation for me. And even now, my team is now trying to consider we can do the Delphi or we can do just the thematic analysis as normal.
Okay, thank you. And there is another question, and it says, what made you choose this topic and why is it so close to your heart?
Yes, it's related to the Vietnamese context because, in Vietnamese, the overload of the inpatient care. A lot of patients go to the hospital, in the central hospital, just for very common disease. So the primary care system, especially the ambulatory care system, is really, really important. But in Vietnam, it's now be de-emphasized and not focusing on. So one of the causes is that we have the limited of the human resources. We don't have the qualified ambulatory care doctor. And we even we have not had enough the training for the doctors in the residency program. So to tackle the problem of the overload for the hospital, so we need to go to the root of the problem, that we need to develop the human resources from the beginning. So that's why I try this topic, as the beginning to contribute to improve our healthcare system.
Thank you, Jen. Very convincing answer, and it's a good answer to close this session or to close this talk. Thank you very much. We now move to the next one. We go to Pakistan now to Mevish Shahid, and the title of her talk is "Use of Microcourses to Augment Self-Study Practices for Undergraduate Medical and Dental Students." Mevish, if you're there, the floor is yours. There you are.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I hope my screen is visible. Hello.
You need to start your PowerPoint.
Okay. Okay. Hello.
Yes, great. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Great. So my topic for my proposal is basically the use of microcourses to augment self-study practices for undergraduate medical and dental students. First off, a lot of input was brought in from my very, very helpful team, which is my primary supervisor, Hans Sevelberg, and my daily promoter, Sanya Rovers. They're both from Maastricht. A little background on me. I'm the head of dental education at Azanai Dental College, Superior University in Pakistan. And this entire thing, the entire topic and the entire use scenario is going to be very closely linked with my area of practice and my institute. However, other than that, there is no conflict of interest as such that I would need to report. So where this all stems from is that in general, health professionals need to be lifelong learners, which, the field is constantly evolving. There's new skill sets coming in. After some time, some doctors especially will need to touch up on certain older skills and all of that. And also this is also a regulatory requirement, as it's also part of the CanMed's scholar competency, which is also something that we use in Pakistan. So lifelong learning is a skill that we do want our students to have. However, the main problem with that is that to become good lifelong learners, you need to have a good basis in self-regulated learning or be good self-regulated learners. And that goes through 3 phases, which is also the benchmark of my entire, which is the lens through which I'm taking this entire thing. And the 3 phases basically go through forethought, performance, and then self-reflection. And each of these have their own parts. For instance, forethought, you need to decide on your tasks, your self-motivation, what your beliefs are, whether or not how you can prioritize things. And then performance is actually carrying it through, observing yourself, as well as your impulses and controls. And finally, it's reflecting on how you performed, like what was your judgment, how can you improve yourself. The problem that usually we end up facing is that while students are very, very enthusiastic about learning, they're not very cognizant of how to improve themselves. They're used to having their faculty or tutors or peers tell them how to learn, and which is also evident in research, where highlighting and reading textbooks were often considered the most used method of self-study. And a lot of times our self-study materials, which are textbooks, recorded lectures, all of these are often either lengthy, they're static, you can't really interact with them. They also tend to be passive because you're just taking in information rather than assimilating it, which is required for self-regulated learning. And they're also resource intensive for both students and faculty. So a lot of times the books are very expensive. A lot of our students have trouble getting access to them because the library can only hold so many. And even for the teachers, because the faculty is required to make all of these additional resources for the students to add up to their existing burden of managing their class and their schedule and curriculums, as well as their clinical duties. So having these additional resources being created for them is also a bit resource intensive. So this also brings us to the fact that technology is bringing in a lot of progress in the field of how resources are being made and consumed. So you have online websites and all of these things, and now AI has added to the mix of a lot of resources, which we can't very readily verify. So we can't 100% say that just because an AI told the student that these were the important points, they were actually correct. So there's a lot of ambiguity when it comes to self-study practices among students. So this is where microlearning comes in, which is a promising way of making study materials more accessible and engaging, because it breaks large concepts and large parts of things down into smaller units. There has been a lot of research about this already, and it has been shown to improve retention and engagement. However, there is one drawback to this, which is that it does not have a structure. So oftentimes it's used as an aid to faculty, and you can't really interact and it can't give you feedback on its own, because they're just small disjointed units. There's no structure to it, there's no flow to it, and the different aspects of self-regulation does not enhance get enhanced at any point. So while it is useful for small chunking material and reduces cognitive load, we're not sure that it's helping them in their self-regulated learning. It's still faculty-led learning. So a potential solution that we are presenting is micro courses, which is a extension of microlearning. So you have microlearning bits, but you have turned them into cohesive structured sequences, which usually do have embedded interactivity. So you have quizzes, you would have prompts, you'd have different adaptive learning pathways, and all of that goes into that. And this can potentially scaffold the entire SRL cycle. So forethought, performance, reflection can all be bundled up into different micro courses and help students think about their own learning and their own goals and how they want to achieve them. So basically the main research gap that we have is that while there's a potential benefit to using micro courses, we don't have any specific design or research that can tell us exactly how self-regulated learning is being enhanced. So that is still an area that's very much underexplored, and which would lead us to our central question for the entire project is, how can microcourses be designed and implemented to effectively foster self-regulated learning in an undergraduate or medical and dental education setting? And this further leads us to a few other unanswered questions, which is, do they improve self-regulated learning compared to traditional tools, or is that not getting affected at all, regardless of how they're studying? Would this work across different domains? So for instance, if a student is studying anatomy compared to somebody who is studying a clinical-based subject like general medicine or neurology, will that still hold true? Will the effects still be there? And then we also would like to see whether or not if it's effective against across different cultural linguistic contexts, because a lot of our students may not be comfortable with English. A few of our students may not even be comfortable with Urdu, which is our national language, because there are a lot of multicultural or linguistic contexts as well. And in this, I'm also going to be exploring the concept of microcultures and how that affects how they regulate their learning as well. So would using microcourses help in those situations? And finally, what is the role of AI in creating microcourses and how, in the manner of how they're sustainable or how we can take them forward? So the entire research project, the 4 studies that I've planned, follow these questions. And the general paradigm for all of the studies was pragmatic, because we were using both qualitative and quantitative aspects, and they're also all mixed method studies. So the first one is going to be about microcourses versus traditional self-study tools. And we're going to focus on the forethought part of the cycle, where deciding on their goals and their objectives is going to be paramount, and see how somebody who's using our microcourses versus the traditional tools would benefit. Second study is going to be about domain specificity, so basic sciences, clinical sciences, and this is going to focus on the performance aspect. That do they actually follow through on their goals, or is it possible for them to use microcourses for self-regulated learning in both contexts? And third study is going to then move across into the cultural adaptability of microcourses and whether or not that will help with self-reflection. So whether or not people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages can still use microcourses for the self-reflective part of the cycle. And if microcourses are actually enhancing this self-reflective aspect of it or not. And finally, the last study is going to have an overall view of it, and they're going to compare AI-generated microcourses, co-created or student-created microcourses against faculty-created microcourses to see whether there's any difference in the effectiveness of these courses as well as the feasibility of the courses, and when it comes to motivation and engagement and of the students and ownership of the courses. So general overview of the, I've already sort of told them, but a little overview of the 4 courses, 4 studies is going to be the first one. The main research question we have is, do microcourses improve student ability to learn, to set learning goals and plan strategic strategies to, instead of when they're just using traditional self-study resources? We're basically going to have 2 groups. One is going to be the intervention group and the other is going to be the control group. And we're going to collect data in the form of pre and post self-regulated learning questionnaires, as well as knowledge tests. And we're also going to be asking them to keep reflective diaries. And a lot of these things are going to follow through across the other studies as well. So the goal here would be to see if they can set their goals and their planning. In the second study, similarly, we're going to basically focus on performance. The content type, does the content type make their self-regulated learning better or worse? And again, similar things that we're going to look for, but this time our cohorts are going to be between basic sciences and clinical sciences. And primarily to see, move beyond like, does it work, to how does it work? What is actually happening in it? Third, we're going to be looking in the reflective phase. So in this one, we're going to be having 3 cohorts. Each for one is going to be a multilingual, which is non-local languages. And then we're going to have one group that is Urdu dominant and one for English. And then we're going to see if adding certain features in micro courses, for instance, prompts or summaries in their own languages, can help with their self-regulated learning across the board, or is it better in some languages or not? And finally, it's going to see if we can provide guidelines for creating culturally and linguistically adaptable microcourses for equitable gains. And finally, we're going to look at the overall cycle. And this is basically going to be against 3 groups. One is going to use AI-generated microcourses. The second one will be co-created with students. And the third will be faculty designs, which we're also going to be using as the gold standard to see and basically provide evidence on the trade-off between speed, cost, engagement, and educational effectiveness between these 3 models. So that is the research plan. I would love to take any questions if anybody has them.
Thank you, Mavish. There's not much time for questions, but at least one can be asked, I would say. Okay. You have a question?
Thank you for the presentation. That was really cool. New concept of micro courses. Being from McMaster and having done MHP from Maastricht, I can't help think about PBL. And is there a reason you thought about micro courses and not PBL for self-directed learning?
Yes, primarily because we wanted to focus on their studying habits outside of a standard classroom and things that they can do on their own. Because one of the biggest issues that we do have is that our faculty ends up getting really bogged down into things, especially when you have a cohort of like 150 to 100 sometimes students, which when you split them into PBL, a lot of places, especially a lot of institutes, are smaller. They don't have the infrastructure to support that many study groups. So oftentimes students are expected to study on their own, and there are mostly just lectures and maybe a few tutorials happening on campus. So even if we don't have the structural resources to conduct like PBLs or have the faculty and also the faculty training required for it, or have faculty that has time to manage all of this, because obviously PBLs take more time. So yeah, so we wanted to focus on something students can do on their own time when they're at home and whenever is accessible to them.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Hopefully a quick question online.
The question is, the reaction is very interesting topic, and I see you have handled it very well. Congratulations to the entire team. My question is that what ethical issues do you foresee in your research, and how do you plan to overcome?
Okay,
Wow.
so the primary ethical issue that we do foresee is when we make our groups, because this is also obviously going to be, one group is going to only have access to this. So in that event, we're basically introducing something that the other students do not have. And if there is a benefit to this, they will not be given that benefit, because we will have to make sure that they don't have access to these courses. And also on the flip side, if this doesn't do any benefit to them, we're essentially wasting student time. So there's a little ethical concern about that, but how we intend to work around that is, we will be taking voluntaries in student groups. Basically, students will have to volunteer for this study, so we're not going to be imposing it on anybody. And second of all, we are going to try to make these micro courses and all these things as accessible as possible, as easy to access as possible, so that we don't feel like we are taking up excessive time from them, or we are not leaving them any time to study on their own or attend their classes or any of that. So none of that gets disrupted during this study phase.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's the thing, of course, with randomized controlled trials, that you have one group that is not going to get the treatment, of course. So, but it's good to see such a trial again. I don't see them that often anymore, so great to see. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next speaker, the last speaker of today. And for that, we go back to the United States to Kara Michelson, and her talk is all about reimagining faculty feedback, AI avatars as scalable tools for social cognitive skill building. And in the meantime, there is Kara. Good to see you. The floor is yours.
I'm also muted, so good morning. Okay, good morning and good afternoon. My name is Kara Michelson. Today, I'll share my PhD writing project, which explores how AI-powered avatars might enhance faculty development in giving feedback, focusing on both social, cognitive, and emotional mechanisms that make feedback effective. My supervisors are the wonderful and great Leanne and Elizabeth. Think of feedback as a performance. The stakes are high, and the audience is always watching. Yet, we rarely give faculty a safe stage to rehearse, or a chance for repetitive, deliberate practice to master effective feedback. Traditional feedback, peer role-playing, can feel exposing, awkward, or even judgmental, and it isn't always accessible. Too often, the stage is empty when faculty need it most. Feedback is central to medical education. It shapes competence, professional identity, and relationships. Yet traditional approaches often fall short. Faculty rarely get the workshops or the repetitive practice they need because it's costly and hard to sustain. What we need is a scalable, psychologically safe opportunities to rehearse and master feedback delivery skills. Faculty want to practice giving feedback. In fact, it's the #1 request we receive in the Office for Faculty Development here at CU. But there are challenges. There are limited subject matter experts, role-playing that can invoke negative emotions, and models that aren't scalable. Until now. AI has never been able to truly replicate the human experience, but what if it can? Avatars may offer a unique innovation. Hopefully, they can simulate trust, empathy, and safety while reducing shame and defensiveness. They may also offer a scalable and cost-effective delivery method, making repetitive practice possible beyond what peer or expert role-playing can provide. So my overall research question is, how might AI-powered avatars mediate the social, cognitive, and affect dimensions of feedback, such as trust, empathy, and psychological safety, in ways that enhance faculty learning and extend existing theories of feedback, recognition, and deliberate practice within medical education? My 4 underpinning research questions is the first one: in what context and through what mechanisms do social cognitive elements such as trust, empathy, psychological safety contribute to effective feedback interactions as described in the literature? Number 2, how do faculty perceive the ability of AI-powered avatars to simulate these elements, social cognitive elements that is, during feedback sessions? Number 3, how does avatar-based role play influence emotional experiences and perceived learning efficacy related to traditional role play and feedback training? And last, how does avatars-based deliberate practice impact faculty growth in feedback competence and the reduction of emotional barriers such as shame in the clinical settings? Vygotsky's zone of proximal development is one of the educational theories that is the basis for this whole project. He reminds us that learning happens just beyond our comfort zone, with support that gradually fades as we master new skills. In avatar feedback training, scenario complexity can be the scaffold, starting with simple conversations and building towards a more emotionally charged feedback. The avatar both becomes the challenge and the scaffold. Social presence theory tells us that when learners perceive their partner as real and responsive, engagement deepens, which is the theory that study 1 is based in. Can the AI avatars that blink and nod and respond to tone and empathy, can they heighten the sense of presence, making the experience socially authentic, not just talking to a screen? The Feedback Alliance reframes feedback as a relational act, a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. Study 2 tests whether avatars can simulate enough of that alliance to support trust-building practice without the fear of human judgment. Controlled value theory shows us that emotions aren't background noise. They're the engine of learning. Shame and anxiety narrow focus, while the safety and curiosity expand it. Study 3 explores whether avatars can lower emotional threat, allow faculty to take risks, make mistakes, and stay engaged. Deliberate practice theory underpins Study 4. Performance growth through repetitive feedback and incremental challenge. Can avatars make this possible by providing on-demand, trackable, repeated feedback conversations, turning a one-time workshop into a continuous rehearsal? The first study is to set the foundation for everything that follows. We'll conduct a realist literature review to understand how and why social cognitive elements such as trust, empathy, and psychologically safety make feedback effective. We'll search 6 major databases focusing on studies for 2010 to 2025, but we'll also include earlier landmark papers that shape our understanding of relational feedback. After screening and extracting data, we'll build a matrix of context and mechanisms, asking not just what works, but also for whom and why. The outcome is a synthesized framework that maps how relational dynamics operate in feedback, which we'll turn to use in the design of the survey instruments for the next few studies. The second study brings the rehearsal stage to life. We'll invite about 100 CU faculty members to a 2-hour interactive workshop where they'll practice giving feedback to AI-powered avatars. Each session blends evidence-based framework like Ask, Tell, Ask with active rehearsal and reflection. While one participant interacts with the avatar, peer observe and rate performance using a shared rubric. Data comes from 4 perspectives: self, peers, and the avatar's analytics, and external reviewers. Afterwards, faculty discuss what it felt like. Was the avatar realistic? Did it feel safe, supportive, or awkward? Surveys and interviews will help us understand the feasibility, usability, and emotional experience. By integrating the quantitative ratings with the qualitative narratives, we'll see how avatars are perceived as relational partners, and whether they can truly create a humanistic stage for feedback practice. This third study explores the emotional side of feedback. What happens when we replace a human role-play partner with an avatar? Residents and fellows will participate in a 3-hour feedback workshop that mirrors what happens in study 2, but goes deeper into the emotional experience by having more difficult and more complex feedback cases with the avatars. After practicing feedback with avatars, they'll complete a survey and join group discussions reflecting on realism, comfort, and perceived value. We'll compare these experiences with traditional peer role play, asking whether avatars reduce shame, guilt, or anxiety and support a greater sense of psychological safety and learning efficacy. All qualitative data, interviews, faculty notes, and survey comments will be thematically analyzed. Quantitative survey items will complement these findings, allowing us to triangulate how the avatars influence both feeling and outcomes. Ultimately, the study helps us understand whether avatars can transform emotionally difficult feedback moments into a safe space for authentic learning. This study, study 4, brings everything full circle, moving from short-term exposure to sustained deliberate practice. Early career faculty in our Teaching Scholars program here at CU will begin with an interactive workshop, then transition to a 6-month asynchronous phase with a repetitive practice feedback with the avatars in increasing levels of complexity. Quantitative data, peer, pre and post surveys, rubric scores, and engagement logs will track growth in competence and confidence. Qualitative interviews will explore how repetitive practice can possibly change emotional experience. Do faculty feel less shame, feel more psychologically safe, and greater mastery over time? By combining the numbers with lived experience, this study reveals whether deliberate, emotionally safe avatar practice can truly transform how feedback is learned and delivered. These studies will hopefully generate innovative, scalable tools for faculty development, advancing theory on trust, empathy, and safety, and potentially extend to other feedback-driven professions. The project spans 4 years. Study 1 begins in 2026, followed by the workshops in 2027, and then longitudinal studies through 2029. The use of avatars may provide a psychologically safe environment for rehearsals, bridging existing gaps in feedback training, mitigating experiences of shame, and enhance learning competencies. Moreover, such rich technology may illustrate how digital tools can foster supportive learning environments that complement and extend the foundational theories of Carl Rogers and Vygotsky and others. This work has the potential to transform feedback development in medical education and beyond. When the stage is no longer empty, when practice feels safe, faculty can finally rehearse the hardest conversations in medicine. This is the premise for this work. Thank you. And then I do have references here.
Yeah, also very important references. Thank you, Kara. There's time for some questions. Very intriguing topic, by the way, Kara. Liked it a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think this is such a unique possible solution to an issue that I think a lot of us face as medical educators. And so I noticed that you were looking at both faculty and residents, and I'll center my first question about the residents. The resident teaching time the session time looks to be quite lengthy, 3 hours. I'm curious, are you doing this voluntarily or during like an academic half day, or what was your proposed thought on the session?
That's a great question. We actually have an elective that's called our resident and fellows as educator elective, and we have 3 weeks of in-person sessions, pretty much 5 days a week that we have them for. Our current feedback session is 3 hours and is human given. So we're just going to actually remodel that. So yes, there is some bias in the fact that people who are interested in being clinical educators are signing up for this elective, but we do have a captive audience and we run it 2 times a year.
Awesome. Well, I'm interested to see how this results.
Thanks.
Indeed. Any other questions? I was wondering, of course, there's a lot of practice being done with what we call simulated patients. Is that an option with avatars as well? And if so, I'm not sure what the current state of the technology is, could such an avatar also provide the feedback that is involved in there?
Yes, actually, a couple different ways. The technologist I'm working with has been working with our psych department for the last 5 years, developing avatars. And at that time, he had to develop a whole script on the back end to go down different pathways, whether the student said yes or no or what they were. And so they have been using it in that way. And then we have a simulation center that they're trying to do more authentic so that the avatars can actually sort of think and not be so scripted. And he's working with them on that as well. So there's multiple ways that this can work.
Yeah. Sounds interesting. Also, I'm even thinking because it's quite hard sometimes if you rely on a group to practice something, right? And someone needs to act as a patient or in a critical situation where emotions are involved and stuff. I'm not sure to what extent AI is capable of doing such things that an avatar becomes emotional, for instance. But I know at least from my own experience also in an educational setting that is the most awkward part if you do role play, for instance, with a group, right? Is that something that is already possible?
We're working on the emotion, like the avatar actually showing emotion, but they can be combative, they can be agreeable, so they can have that type of emotion. We're also hoping with the technology and how fast it's going that hopefully towards like study 4, we can actually have faculty input scenarios where they're, dreading or wanting help delivering like specific feedback to a specific situation so that they can practice it before going into the setting and actually having to deliver it. So
yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. As the last speaker, thank you so much for doing the last presentation. That's also the end of this session, of course. Thanks to all the speakers, not only Kara, but also the rest, both online and here. Thanks also to the audience, both online and here. Thanks also to the technical guys in the back for making this session possible. Thanks a lot. The next session of She Presents will be on the 9th of December, and it will be entirely online. So hope to see you there. And for the rest, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.